In a quiet Pennsylvania town, the night didn't just creep in, it ran. 17 children walked out of their homes at exactly 2:17 a.m. One class, one teacher, and one kid left behind. Justine Gandy, the teacher whose class vanished, is accused by whispers and suspicion. Her life unravels, grief, isolation, and the truth clawing at every door. Archer Graff, the father of one of the missing, refuses to wait for answers. When police slow walk the investigation, he steps into the dark. Rituals, nightmares, the weight of community suspicion, a teacher's cut hair, magic that tastes like betrayal, and children drawn to a house not by want, but by something else. From director Zach Cregger comes a horror mystery that doesn't let you look away, because once you see the horror, it sees you back. Weapons. When disappearance becomes spectacle, truth becomes ritual, and the only way forward is to stare darkness in the eyes.
Welcome to the Burnt or Buttered podcast, where we talk about movies.
And today we're talking about weapons.
And man, this was quite the flick.
Yeah. You know, I had only just recently seen Barbarian for the first time this year, right before this movie came out. And so I kind of had high expectations for it. And it kind of blew me out of the water.
Yeah. I saw Barbarian a couple, when it came out a year or so ago, 2 years ago.
3, I think.
3 years ago.
Yeah.
I saw it because I was trying to see a different movie that I thought it was. So I think I was watching it like on a date or something like that. And, I was like, oh yeah, I've heard of this movie, and I can't remember what movie it was that I actually was trying to watch.
Yeah.
But, I was like, let's watch it. So we started watching. I was like, this is not the movie that I thought it was. But Barbarian was pretty good too. Yeah, I had the opportunity of seeing this movie after you and Sammy had seen it, and kind of had given it, had told me your opinions about it. So I went into it expecting a lot. Mm-hmm. I thought that I feel like, what's his name? Zach Cregger took a lot of inspiration from other directors in this movie. Have you seen White Lotus?
I haven't.
So there's a couple, I think 3 seasons of White Lotus now, and White Lotus has a very distinct directorial style. Very distinct, like score. Very distinct type of shooting and everything else. And the beginning, probably like 30 minutes of this movie, was very much White Lotus.
Oh, really?
Like even the score itself and how it ended and just chimes and everything else felt very White Lotus.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Well, I have nothing to say about that because I haven't seen the show.
I'm interested to see, if anyone else noticed that.
Yeah.
It didn't continue throughout the whole movie, but as we're discovering things, and White Lotus is a lot about that, of just you're definitely like looking into how weird and individualistic like people's lives are, and how a bunch of things are happening at the same time. And how people are seeing the world in a different way.
And it's not like a linear storytelling, maybe.
It is linear, but it's done in a way kind of like Weapons, how they'll show a perspective and then go back in time and show that same perspective in a different way.
So it's kind of chopped up the same way.
Yeah. But what made me think that it was like White Lotus was more so the style of shooting than anything else, and how the score was connected to this style of shot. Okay. And the initial storytelling of Weapons. I did like that the trailer was just like the first 3 minutes of the movie.
Yeah. So you didn't get too much of the story. You just got the premise, which is great. Love a trailer like that where it just tells you the premise.
We're going to start a podcast just talking about the trailers of movies. Because, there's movies that do it right, movies that definitely do it wrong.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I feel like this was interesting that, your first few minutes of the movie is just kind of rewatching the trailer. The kid who is narrating, I feel like does a really good job as well. There's just like a lot of drama and intrigue and also kind of like plainness of just like, this is just what happened. There's no real emotion behind it.
It's not like there's no opinion behind it. It's just these are the facts, kind of. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Yeah, I know that people are talking about it being reminiscent of The Shining in a couple scenes towards the end. I guess Zach Cregger has talked about how horrific seeing The Shining was in his childhood and seeing the twins in the hallway. So that's why, or essentially his Alex's parents standing in the hallway next to the, guarding the door are essentially the twins. And then obviously him, them knocking the bathroom door down and stuff. Like that's, even watching it, I was like, this feels like The Shining.
Yeah. Well, and their faces going through the holes in the door. Yeah, it was definitely like an homage to The Shining, which I think it's cool to see. I like that. It kind of reminds me of The Monkey, where there's just like so many other comedies inside of this horror film, like just moments that were not necessarily taken, but it's like a tribute to them.
Which is funny because that's also a Stephen King novella, The Monkey. So lots of Stephen King up in this place.
Stephen King's everywhere nowadays. You got Life of Chuck.
Yeah.
You got The Monkey.
Crazy year for Stephen King. Who would have thought?
He's getting a lot of royalties. That's what he said. But yeah, this story is told in a very interesting way. The acting in it is done really well. I don't know the actress's name, but she's in
Ozark. Yeah, Julia Garner.
Yeah, and she does really well. Like in a completely different style than she normally is. And there's a lot of layers to these characters, which is interesting.
Yeah, they feel, like we've got Julia Garner, Justine Gandy as a teacher. And, in our society, teachers are looked at as you've got to be proper. Because you're the example for these kids. You're the one teaching these kids. So you don't think of them as really having an outside life. And when you do think of them as having an outside life, it's very respectable, know. And the first thing that we see her do is hook up with her old boyfriend who, is an alcoholic trying to get over his alcoholism, and she's pressuring him to have drinks and,
Well, and she knew that he was still with her. Yeah.
Oh yeah. She knew, like,
he said that they were on a break or whatever, but she definitely knew.
Yeah. So you get this duality in this character where her outward facing, public persona is like, I'm a good person. I'm very proper. I care about these kids. And then in private, she's, got all these personal problems, that people don't like to see. And so it's interesting.
Well, and with that too, like you see the depth of her character, but then also it leads you down the path of, does she have anything to do with the disappearance of the kids? She obviously has her own problems, but is she evil? did she in some way, shape, or form influence this? It really makes you start questioning that, because it's showing you that she's willing to do not so moral stuff.
Sure. Yeah. And then you've got
Archer.
Yeah. Who is like this essentially like everyday man, but like the good in everyday man, right? Like he loves his kid, his family.
He's
hardworking. Seems to be inward and outward facing the same guy mostly,
Yeah, that just is broken. Yeah, because his son's disappeared.
Yeah.
But then his kid's a freaking bully.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's interesting because then, Alex has the opportunity to then become the bully, but he instead, ends up like feeding them soup and stuff, like keeping them all alive.
Yeah. His part of this story is there, I feel like, the most important part. Like all the other parts of it is kind of just giving color to the story, but he actually has the internal struggle throughout the whole movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like first he doesn't like his aunt showing up or whatever, then his parents get possessed, and then he's just trying to get his parents back. He just wants his life and his parents back. He wants to be a normal kid.
Yeah.
And then his whole entire class gets freaking hypnotized or whatever it is. And he has to go and try and keep everything together, be an adult, take care of all these humans while holding in the secrets, while still like trying to be a normal kid every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like the kid that played the character just did a really good job showing like the depth of all those different types of emotions that this young kid has to go through.
Yeah.
What's his aunt's name? Do you remember?
Gladys, I think.
Gladys. Yeah, the reveal of Gladys is pretty insane.
Yeah.
A question that I do have is, why was Alex left? Like, why did she never even consider taking Alex? I mean, to use him as a tool for sure, but she's obviously siphoning life out of the other people,
yeah,
some way, shape, or form. That's like her goal, and
right.
Her parents weren't doing enough, so she needed more. But why not Alex?
Well, I think she did consider Alex until she realized that she could get the whole class. I thought that there was a scene where she almost was talking about like, if you don't do this, then I'll have to use you or something like that.
Oh, really? I don't remember that scene.
It's been like a month since I've seen it. So,
she always, I feel like Alex was always going to be a tool to her, in some way, shape, or form. But I just don't know when she decided that. He leaves her school, the parents are there. He comes back, the parents are hypnotized or whatever at the dinner table. It's just a weird, unknown thing to me.
Well, I mean, thinking about like mythological lore and whatnot, a lot of times these like monsters or whatever, witches, vampires, whatever, they'll have like a henchman or a sidekick that's not necessarily like they're compliant more than anything, but they're not really on their side. They do it because they kind of have to. They have no other choice. So if we're thinking about it in that sense, then it kind of makes sense that she would have like a normal person that could fit into society.
Yeah. Yeah. You just feel so bad for him. And the final the final act of this movie of the kids chasing Gladys through, and you're having like almost like a Sandlot type chase through the neighborhoods and stuff, and these kids like breaking through windows and doing everything to try and
like zombies.
Yeah, to like tear this freaking woman apart. I wonder why when she dies and the enchantment's broken, why they don't just go back to normal. You know, like it talks about them, like some of them learned how to talk again. You know?
Well, so part of it, I think, is that this whole thing is an allegory kind of for like abuse. And so I think that it would have been too easy for all of them to, like, narratively, it would have been too easy for them to all just be like totally fine after this. They've been through some horrific things, including probably malnutrition, despite Alex feeding them soup every night, you know, like, they've been through some extremely horrific things. Also, like, their life essence was being sucked from them. So
that's a good point.
There's so many possibilities of why, but I think scientifically and magically, there's some pretty obvious ones.
Yeah, I thought it was just an interesting choice, and not a choice that I disagree with, that I thought was wrong. I thought it was interesting because you don't see that. Like, most of the time you have the happy ending where like the kids go back to like, Dad, ooh, you know, like, I'm so glad that you're back, you know, whatever. But it wasn't that. It was definitely like not happy.
Yeah.
Grateful that kids are back, but not happy.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, like, how do you explain that past that? Like, you have these kids, you have this witch, like, you just explain it as a witch. You just explain that they got possessed, and that's it. And
like the whole town is just going to believe this, and
you're just going to be okay with it.
The police aren't going to be questioning, Gandy and Archer. Like, they would be like prime suspects right behind Alex's parents, you know?
For sure.
But I guess when you have a woman ripped to pieces in somebody's front lawn, that's pretty evident, you know, like, oh, who's this? I don't know. I feel like you could get there.
Well, and then you have the principal or whoever kills his husband and then gets ran over.
Man, that face smashing was crazy.
That was hard to watch.
It was. Yeah. Same with the ripping her up.
Oh yeah, the kids freaking tearing her up.
That was a tough watch. That was crazy.
That's what these freaking horror movies, dude. Like, it's like a great solid movie all the way up. Every single one of them does this. Like, it's like such a crazy good movie, and then you get 20 minutes to the end, and then we have to fit in all the gore and all the horror. Like, in the last 20 minutes. It's just like, I just don't like that about like the horror genre. Like, don't do so much at the end. Like, just have it be gruesome. Like, but does it have to be freaking that crazy? Because it just turns me off. You know, like it. I love what I'm watching, and then all of a sudden I'm just like, it's just gross.
Yeah. I can't decide, you know, because there's the shock factor the first time that you watch it, and I can't decide if it's worth it really when it's that graphic.
Well, and you have movies that are graphic and gory throughout the film. You know, like you have like Saw or Final Destination or whatever it is. Like, and I'm more acceptable to that,
where it's continuous all the way through,
than like Substance. You know, you have this crazy cool movie throughout the whole thing, and then the last 20 minutes you have this gore monster and, you know, fire hose of blood, you know, painting the walls and everything else. And you're just like, man, like that just that last 20 minutes of the movie that makes me not want to kind of rewatch it.
It almost negates the good writing in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, same thing with Bring Her Back. It was kind of similar, but I think Bring Her Back does it in a better way.
It wasn't like comedic in Bring Her Back so much.
Yeah.
You know, like I think maybe that's where the line is where it's like to be funny versus like this is something that happened.
I don't know. I feel like you have to have a certain amount of gore or something to
warm you up
to be classified as a horror movie instead of just a suspense. You know, like I think that's where it's just like, oh, we have to put it into horror. So we have to have this much, you know, gore.
Because it's part of the genre.
Yeah, and because if it wasn't that, it would just be a suspense movie, you know, or a thriller.
Yeah.
So the horror genre, like this year has been the year of horror, and it's coincidental that we start this podcast, and I'm not a horror fan, and I'm forced to watch every horror movie that's out there.
And all of a sudden, you're super into them.
Well, I can appreciate. I think one thing that I heard was that horror, and I can't remember. And superhero movies are like the only movies that are like kind of being allowed to be made, or kind of indie film like horrors can be made cheaply, and so you can actually tell like independent, original stories because of that.
Yeah,
and so I feel like that's why like there's been so much horror in the last year, because people are trying to make their films, but they have to fit it into this category. I don't know,
or they just like horror. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
Another thing, just a side note that I thought was interesting about Zach Cregger in this movie and in Barbarian is that he'll put some iconography into it. Like the kids left their homes at exactly 2:17, you know, and he'll put these exact numbers and let the audience decide what the meaning is, you know. Like Jordan Peele will put like actual Bible verse references and stuff, specific things that he wants people to get out of it. And Zach Cregger, I don't know if he's like poking fun at it or if he's poking fun at the audience to see what kind of things that they'll attribute to whatever he throws in it. There was another thing in the classroom. They had on one of the boards, obviously it had the word parasite on the chalkboard. And then there were these two words in Latin that kept on popping up. And I was like, what does that say? And so I looked it up afterwards, and it was referring to sharks with teeth and without teeth or something like that. Like
it was just animals.
But like one of the words was like mystici or something like that. So it like seemed, important. Like that's going to be about magic or something. It totally just to throw you off the scent. I don't know.
What other movies have like primed us for that? Like primed us to look for those things.
Yeah. Like I feel like horror films in general kind of do that, you know?
Like M. Night
yeah, he'll do a lot of that stuff.
Where you're just like, oh, does that mean something? Is that super important or what?
And this movie had that feeling where you're like, oh, there's going to be a deeper meaning. And I kind of left the theater thinking, was there a deeper meaning?
I don't think there was. I think that the 2:17 definitely had significance in the way that that's when she finally like summon the kids, and it was a huge thing to Alex because Alex didn't know what was happening. He thought his parents were going to be freed. You know, and so like you see all the clocks and everything, boom, 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 and all the kids come running. But I don't think there is anything too crazy. I didn't see the abuse side that you had talked about. That it's you know kind of in relational to look at it as like an abusive relationship or abuse in general of having that trauma, and I could see that.
Like when you were talking about it, you like completely described Alex being in an abusive home. Yeah. And that's when it clicked for me. Like I didn't really click for me during the movie, but I heard a few people talking about it. And then when you laid it all out, I was like, whoa, that is exactly what that is.
Yeah. And kids live that life sometimes.
Yeah.
But sweet. Let's throw a rating on this guy.
All right.
What do you think?
I had a lot of fun watching it. There were some parts I thought that were kind of repetitive with the, going back in time and showing it from different perspectives and whatnot. Sometimes it just didn't feel like it gave enough of a different perspective, so it felt a little bit repetitive. But I really enjoyed the whole movie. There were a lot of really funny parts. We didn't even talk about the cop and the junkie.
Oh yeah,
stabbing him with the needles and stuff.
I forgot that whole sequence of it.
Which was like, that was such a fun whole part of the movie. Anyways, there were a lot of great parts. I'm going to give it a 4.
Nice.
So yeah.
Man, yeah, I don't know how I forgot the junkie.
Yeah.
It's super good acting and storytelling there. I agree with all that you had to say. I think that I went into this kind of expecting a lot because you and Sammy came out and like, best movie of the year. Like really good.
Don't put words in our mouth. We did not say those words.
I'm pretty sure that's exactly what I read.
Maybe Sammy did. I did not say that.
So I went into it like, I'm going to be blown away by this movie. And I was pleasantly surprised by it, in the way that it was good. But I didn't think it was revolutionary. I didn't think it was like anything crazy. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 3.8. I thought it was really good. I probably should give it a little bit higher. I'll say 4. I'm going to say 4.
Pretty close scores today.
And so, yeah, I think that this is one that's definitely worth watching, definitely worth going out and appreciating storytelling. And yeah, let us know what you think.
Yeah. Catch you on the next one.